Welcome to the Executive Innovation Show podcast, where we bring you real executive conversations with industry game changers and thought leaders. We ask the questions you're thinking, what you're scared to ask, and we make your brain hurt afterward. With your host, Carrie Chitsey, co-founder and CEO of One Touch Video Chat, live video interviews, and the nonprofit Humans Helping Humans.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining today's podcast. We have an exciting podcast today. We're going to be talking about community banking beyond four walls, brought to you by One Touch Video Chat and live video interviews. I got two amazing men on the podcast today. They're doing great things in community banking. I've got Tim Schneider, who's the CEO of Investor Community Bank and one of the bank's co-founder. He's been in the banking profession for over 30 years and helped start the bank with three other entrepreneurs in 1997. And then later in the show, we're going to be talking to Steve Miller, who's the president and CEO of Fresno First Bank, one of the largest single branch locations community banks in the country, and has worked in the financial services sector for over 25 years, domestically and internationally. Since joining in 2015, he's doubled the assets and seen the Spark evaluation double as well. Tim, first on the show, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Carrie. Appreciate you having me.
Well, great. Going to kind of set the table for today's podcast of community banking beyond four walls. Community banking has really changed, and a lot of things have really contributed to that. So first, we've seen over 10,000 banks close, branches close in the last 10 years, and 3,300 in 2018. This is averaging about 3 a day. Community banking used to be a lot about the real estate game, in addition to providing kind of higher customer experiences, and that's no longer really the leading strategy. Customers are more digital, using more mobile apps for banking, and really not coming into the branch as much as they used to. 82% of banks are planning on rolling out video banking or currently enrolling out video banking to try to bridge that gap of coming into a physical location, still having that face-to-face, which bank employees love to be able to get additional products and services and understand their customers. We saw a big trend a few years ago with video ITMs and that being deployed. That's kind of been ratcheted back because they're so expensive. So I want to first start talking about, Tim, you guys have 4 locations, but still have reached the 10th largest community bank in Wisconsin. And you guys have a lot of business, agriculture clients. And so I'm sure that's changed your strategy a little bit of going out into their environment and kind of expanding out of those 4 walls. How has this changed for you over time with having these customers that, you know, might be out in a field and can't come into the 8 to 5? Has that changed how you think about those relationships?
Well, it has. When we founded the bank, I grew up on a dairy farm here not far from the bank. And so it's an industry that I'm passionate about and I understand thoroughly. We have always tended to take the bank to the customer. And our ag lenders, which we have 11 of them, all have company vehicles. They're out visiting their clients quite often. They many times will jump in a tractor or a combine with the farmer and ride along, and that's how they communicate when they're busy and they're in the field. So, but it has changed, and we realize that banking needs have changed, and those clients are demanding higher tech products and services, which we've migrated to. I mean, for us, with the 4 limited branch locations, having remote deposit capture 15 years ago or 20 years ago was a godsend to us to bring those deposits in for those clients further away from the bank. Now it's moving to mobile banking. It's the internet banking services that we're offering. So it's changing, and obviously it's an evolving space that we need to stay on top of and serve our customers, both with the in-person contact and the technology that they're demanding as clients these days as well.
Well, great. And I want to roll back a little bit because you started, you're one of the co-founders of the bank. You and 3 other entrepreneurs started this. And coming kind of from the outside in, I know you guys have been real technology focused. Do you think being kind of from the outside and starting this bank, there was not a lot of, historical kind of, we do it this way, red tape, and that has allowed you guys to really embrace technology better than some other community banks, or taking out some of that red tape from that perspective? Or how do you look at that, of how you guys are so kind of embracing technology?
Yeah, well, we started the bank way back when with one single location here in Manitowoc, which is our headquarters, and then have expanded out, added a de novo branch in Stevens Point, Wisconsin back in 2010, and then did an acquisition that included 2 branches, one in Appleton and Green Bay, Wisconsin, back in 2016. We really started with, and I think I give credit to one of my other partners and co-founders, Bill Sensky, who's our chairman of the board, who had this kind of futuristic vision of what banking was going to move to and not have as heavy a branch network.
Yeah.
And I think that has helped us over time, where a lot of other banks, as you alluded to before, have been closing branches because there's duplication and clients aren't using the branch as much anymore. We only have one single branch location in the markets that we're in to serve the clients that still want to talk to somebody face to face and come in and do their banking, in person. But we understand that they're going to need and desire those dual paths with the technology. So I think that has allowed us to adapt to the evolving space, because we don't have that overhead that many institutions have that they struggle with from a cost perspective, whether they can introduce some of the new technology. So I think that's benefited us for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love earlier you mentioned, your relationship guys jump up on the tractor and have their own cars or trucks to be able to go out kind of in the field. As you look at, how it is today and, maybe how it is from 5 years from now, with going out into the field and going out and talking to folks, there's only so much a relationship manager can reach and proactively do. Historically, you kind of focus on the 20% of, the clients that are either, need you the most, or, maybe have the most going on at the time. With technologies like video banking, where right off of a bank's website, your customers or prospective customers can click a button and be able to video with your employees. How does that change your look on your relationship managers in the field today? Obviously, some of that still needs to happen, but can you reach more customers that way? Or how does that apply how do you see that in the future on the agriculture side with what you guys are doing with business banking?
Yeah, I think it applies to both the agricultural side and the commercial banking side. We're heavy in the commercial side as well, and I think we've had this conversation recently, Carrie, and we are looking to introduce some video conferencing, video chat into our suite as well. And I think what it'll do is it'll allow some of our bankers to maybe stay in touch with their borrowers and customers a little more closely and not have to always have that personal touch. Although we're still going to do that because that's important and the clients demand it. But there are certain transactions or relationship type situations that come up that don't require a 4-hour drive for one of our ag bankers, which is reality for some of them to reach some of their clients that are in the further reaches of the state. So that'll definitely benefit us. It'll benefit them when they have an electronic banking issue, that they can call into our electronic banking team and actually see a face. And that, in my mind, really helps solidify that relationship versus just a phone call where they hear a voice on the other side.
Right. And so as you look at, how your branch is set up today, are you guys in today's, the branch locations, a lot of community banks are, having smaller kind of micro branches and then connecting some specialties, not in every location. How is your branch set up today? And how do you see that evolving, from the look, feel, all the different types of employees? In your mind, how is that today? And then how do you look to see that in the future?
So your question is perfect, because we're actually considering some of these things that you mentioned a minute ago as we speak. We were in the residential mortgage business up until about 5 or 6 years ago, and decided to get out of that business. It was more of an accommodation to our ag and commercial customers. But when the regulations got so out of control with the last administration, we decided to exit the business. We just weren't that good at it, and it definitely wasn't a revenue driver for us. we've decided that to capture the entire relationship of our borrowers on the personal side in particular, and mainly on the commercial side, that we need to get back in this business. So we've hired what we call a concierge banker, very similar to a private banker, who's going to deliver residential mortgage services and take care of all their private banking needs from a personal perspective. And as we think about that model being built out with 4 branches, we think we can serve that, at least initially, with one person, and maybe over time have one other person, and we can video chat and have conversations to accommodate the transactions and needs of these clients on a day-to-day basis. So, we have thought about that, and I think that that helps us with the smaller branch model, that we can potentially serve those clients as they need those services that way.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that. We are seeing a lot lately of what people are calling video mortgage advisors, and a lot of your millennials that are, first-time home buyers that are buying, expensive homes. They need more of a hand-holding, and they're really looking for more of a advisor, and, they want that authentic kind of face-to-face relationship. So we're seeing a lot more of that. As 10 years ago, it was all about rate. It was all about transaction. Now you do have these fintech companies that are doing mortgages online, but you still can't replace that face-to-face, being able to see someone. So we always ask before we let you.
So just to answer one of your other questions about branch reconfiguration, if you want me to, Carrie, we are actually studying that as well. And we've never been a heavy retail bank. So if you go into our branches today, many of our personal bankers have cash drawers, so you can sit down at a desk in an office and take care of a cash transaction if you need to. You want that privacy. Our teller lines are very distinctly different than you're going to see in a traditional bank. We've got maybe 2 windows, and they're walled up, and it's kind of private as well from to provide privacy for people in their transactions. But we've been seeing kind of a migration to sort of a pod banking environment where personal banker will sit, at a so-called kind of station out in the lobby with, again, some privacy barriers for people to have conversations and keep it private. And we're looking to potentially do that with our new branch we're going to be building in Appleton. And I think over time, we will renovate and modify our existing branch locations to accommodate that. And that's becoming obviously much more popular these days. And I think that's how people prefer to do banking.
Yeah, that makes sense. And as if you choose to add more branches in the future, square footage wise, are you looking at something maybe smaller since you don't need as many people and you can connect to other locations? Or will that size, in your mind, be similar?
Well, some of that's going to be driven by some of the central employees that we have.
Right.
And Appleton's a good example. We're going to probably be building a much larger branch there because we've got additional people that are in our credit department, our loan ops area that support us there as well. But I would say if we're looking at a branch in the future in a market that's a little more distant, we probably would be looking at a much smaller footprint because we're not going to need that space as dramatic as we have in the past.
Well, great. Before I let you go, I ask everybody on the show, as a community bank CEO, what is keeping you up at night? And this is not children, spouses, banking related. What are your 2 things that keep you up at night?
Yeah, probably today. Our valuation's been a little bit depressed. We're a public company. We're trading under book value, which is kind of discouraging to us because we've continued to perform very well. We think a lot of that has to do with our heavy ag focus and some of the continued negative ag news that's been out in the media, hitting the front page on the Wall Street Journal, where in the past it had been on the section C, page 12, you'd see a little blurb about it. But we're confident that things are starting to turn around in the dairy space. The sector we serve, milk prices are a lot better. That's the other piece that keeps me up at night. I mean, our dairy farmers are really hardworking, very honest, good people, and I want them to survive and thrive in this environment. And we're hopeful that we'll see sustained better commodity prices for our farmers long term, and then turn around and help us from a valuation standpoint as well.
Well, that's great. It's very customer centric. I love that. Well, great, Tim. It has been so great to have you on the show. Everybody click on the link to follow Tim and Investor Community Bank's journey. Next up on the guests, we're going to be talking to Steve. Tim, thanks again for joining.
Yep. Thank you, Carrie. Appreciate you having me. Have a great day.
Well, we talked earlier and gave Steve's introduction. Again, Steve is president and CEO of Fresno First Bank. Steve, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me, Carrie.
Well, awesome. Well, congratulations first on having one of the largest single branch community banks in the country. And I know that means that real estate has not contributed to some of that growth. So want to talk to you a little bit of how you really extended beyond the traditional community bank branch location to really make this growth happen.
Yeah, I think I always joke and say that it was either a great strategy or dumb luck. But, when we started the bank almost 15 years ago now, the technology back then that people were using was the remote deposit capture.
Yeah.
And, that is the workhorse of banking. I mean, there's still more checks written today on the business side than there were, 15 years ago. That technology has gotten better. I think we just did a really good job of kind of deploying that out to the right customers. Now, we're a business bank,
Yep.
So our dependency on branches on every corner is very different if you had a consumer bank. So I appreciate that. And it's not that we don't like branches. I think branches are still important. You just need one in each market as far as I'm concerned. But that workhorse, that RDC machine really helped us. And I think we've just done a good job adapting, kind of bringing the internet and cash management systems and now mobile banking into play there. 90% of our customers and probably 99% of our profit never steps foot in our branch. So just trying to leverage what's there, and we don't have any legacy baggage, so it helps us out.
So you kind of you answered a little bit of my next question, but you used to think that in talking to you before that you needed 4 or 5 branches and you needed more of that presence. But as you just said, 90% of your customers don't step into the branch. So how does that, from a relationship standpoint, how does that make you think about kind of the future on managing those digital relationships and physical branches? Has your strategy changed in regards to that, given some of that data you just said?
Yeah, I think, when we, so we have a loan production office in Los Angeles. So LA is about 4 hours south of us here in California. And that was when we looked at Southern California, one of the largest markets in the country. We said, hey, I bet you I can cover it with 4 or 5 branches, assuming I have the same radius that we've accomplished here in Fresno. That was 2 years ago. There's been some things we've kind of taken our time, and last year I looked at it and said, well, I don't need 4 or 5. I'll probably just get one nice branch in the right spot and leverage technology.
Yeah.
And that is our plan for next year. But since in the last year, we've actually added a lot of remote customers in the LA basin. Some of our best customers actually are now down there. And then it's kind of begging the question of, well, why the heck do I even need a branch down there? So,
right.
So that's been really, some of the things that we've thought about. I think that, we're very similar to a lot of companies. I mean, it's, you want to be high touch and high tech. And I go back to the Wizard of Oz, the customer wants to be walking down that golden brick road, but, we're behind the green curtain, kind of riding that bike and trying to run it almost like a credit card program, because I think you can apply technology to be efficient in the background. Customer never has to know about it,
right.
Because you can still go see them and talk to them and all that stuff. So,
no, I like that analogy. That's great. So do you think, given that you guys have kind of set this up where you have the processing centers, you have, kind of the branch, do you think that gives you guys kind of some competitive advantage for these digital technologies, like, any digital technology, video banking, things like that, because you've already kind of created that culture and you're not taking all these physical branches and trying to change some of that culture of tellers and relationship managers and things like that? Do you think that you've kind of already set up that employee culture is typically one of the biggest things when you look at digital technologies or video banking of, oh, well, we've done it this way for 10 years. It's really hard to change some of those employees of those new technologies. Do you think that the way that you guys have done is kind of set you up, that you've already kind of done some of that foundation to roll out those technologies maybe better than some of the traditional retail brick and mortar branches?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be lying if change is always hard for staff and for customers. You know, we just did a core conversion earlier this year, and I think the biggest issue with our customers was the receipts that we've been giving them were bigger than the ones that we're now giving them. So that was a major issue apparently. So change is always difficult, but I would say that, you know, I do think we have an advantage because we can try things and it's not that much of an impact. So if I try a new technology, you know, I'm only dealing with the small team that I have in this one location. So it's easier to communicate, it's easier to test things. And I think with our customer base is a remote customer base. And for years, we talked about, I mean, we have great service and we have a really good service reputation. But what our people never understood was none of your big customers ever come see you. So you're applying great service from a remote fashion. So we're already doing it.
Right.
So it's more like a psychological shift that they kind of finally had to say, oh, I didn't realize we were a remote bank already. We've been doing it for the last 15 years. So, but yeah, to your point, I think, you know, for us, the big thing now is really, you know, we don't mind going out and seeing our customers. And that's fine if they're within 40, 50 miles of our branch here, you know, to go visit a farmer out in the field or someone who has a manufacturing facility and take a tour of them. But, you know, now it's 200 miles south of us in Los Angeles. You can't always just drive down there and come back at lunchtime. You know, how do I incorporate video and how do I incorporate conference calling techniques that allow me to have that perception of that high touch, even though I'm not face to face. So,
yeah. So we actually have a new white paper coming out about this in a few weeks. But I want to ask you this question: is video banking has been thrown around in the banking industry for the last couple of years. I think the number's 82% of banks will be implementing video banking in the next 12 to 18 months. There's a lot of, when you say video banking, there's a lot of misconception of what does that really mean? Is it video conferencing? Is it video ITMs? Is it truly video banking? Now that you've kind of seen what video banking kind of is, of connecting customers, you know, from your website, browser, all that kind of thing. Was it different than when you heard the word video banking in the industry? Like, what does video banking mean to you now that you've kind of seen different realms of it versus maybe what you thought 6 months ago?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I always go back to fintech. I mean, fintech has this big, broad umbrella. And 90% of fintech is still online lending for consumers, you know, and I did that back in the 90s. It's just kind of lipstick on a pig. So true fintech to me is really making things more efficient in banking, you know, and a lot of stuff around payments and all that. And I kind of see video the same way. A lot of people think of video as like ATMs, right? Yeah. That's their first default. We have one ATM machine and it's here at my branch. I have no other ATM machines. So video ATM is kind of useless to me.
And so expensive.
And expensive. So what we think of for video, and I'll give you an example, is we now do a lot of remote, not just California, but across state lines. So one of our largest customers happens to be in North Carolina. It's kind of odd for a Fresno bank to have a customer in North Carolina, but we needed to do a site visit and kind of talk to them about a few things and kind of do a tour of their factory just to check a couple boxes. I mean, we'd asked them for everything. So we just did a simple Skype call and, you know, talked to him, and he kind of walked around his office. Now it's a little clunky because it wasn't perfectly set up that way, but, you know, that type of, you know, that video technology that's out there, especially if it can be integrated into your core, you know, your core platform and all that stuff, is really, really helpful. And I think that, you know, if you're, and it's not just, you know, Gen Y and the millennials that are used to video, everybody's used to it. And I think the numbers will show you that I don't care if you're 20 or 70, technology is a big part of your life. And I think that the adoption of that is going to come. It's, you know, it happens a lot quicker than it did in the past. So.
Great. And so with the, you know, physical presence of folks, you know, business banking, people are very busy. You have people that, you know, you're trying to expand them, whether they're, you know, high net worth and you're trying to have their personal money as well as the business. And, you know, as a business owner, you know, my banker calls me all the time, let's get lunch, let's do this. And, you know, I don't have time for all that. But as you talk about that kind of physical presence of still wanting, I mean, banks want to have that face-to-face relationship, right? And customers do too. It's just a matter of everybody's busy. We live in this digital world where, I can click a button and have my groceries in an hour and things like that. Where do you see the most opportunity for kind of pairing this physical and this digital world when it comes to technologies like a video banking from the business banking side, sitting kind of in your shoes? Where does it solve some of those problems of having that human relationship, but doing it in a digital manner?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the video piece, I agree with you. We always tell our customers, look, you have a business to run, so I don't really want to bother you. And, I have a lot of tools that will keep you from having to drive to our branch. And for us as a single branch, that's a big commute for some people. I mean, we're not a mile away. They might have to drive 20 minutes out of their way. So that's 40 minutes of their day just to come see us. So if I can do a simple call, from mobile to mobile, and even if it's a 2-minute conversation, and it might even be simple, but I think people still want the human interaction. And it's not necessarily face-to-face, it's more the voice and looking someone in the eye. And you can still do that. The quality of video today allows you to have a meaningful conversation on a video chat. And to your point, if you're busy and you can sit there with your phone while you're sitting in the parking lot between meetings, or at least walking around your office, I think there's a lot of meaning in that. I think people really grasp onto that. People don't need to come to the bank to do day-to-day transactions, right? That has been solved. It's been solved for a long time.
Yeah.
When they interact with the bank now, those are typically really important conversations, or at least they need to feel they need to talk to somebody. And again, I go back to, yes, there's probably a higher percentage of my customers over 50 that will want to have breakfast and lunch, and they'll make the time to do that. They're old school. They like it.
Meal.
Yeah, right. But the younger business owners, and we deal with a lot of them, they're now really valuing that personal touch. Now, personal touch to them is could just be quality video, and I think that'll check the box and make them happy, and give them the assurance that, hey, there's a live person. I talked to Steve today. He assured me it's going to happen. And then our job is still to execute and fulfill properly. So
right. So as you expand and maintain the largest single community bank branch, as you grow kind of your team, when you're looking at your core staff and hiring and decisions from that perspective, are you looking for a different type of employee than maybe that's worked at a traditional consumer-facing bank? Is it a different type of employee that now can go out to the customer versus the customer coming in, that can work with this digital technology? Like, how's that changed for you as a CEO? Are the requirements the same? Are they different? Like, how's that changed for you?
I guess, there might be some technology comfort that people need to really understand, but, to be a successful RM today is you need the same skill sets that you needed 20 years ago. To be a relationship manager, especially in business banking, it is a 24/7 job.
Right.
If you want to come in here and work 8 to 5 and never leave the office, you're going to fail miserably at being a commercial banker, because the business owner they work during 8 to 5. They don't have time for you. So you got to either see them early, see them late, go to an event at night to catch them at some cocktail party, maybe even attend like a function or a wedding that they invited you to over the weekend. So that job itself and the people that are really good at it has always needed a level of flexibility and a level of, I'm willing to go out and sacrifice my stuff for the customer.
Right.
I think it's the same thing. It's just packaged up a little bit different. And on our video conversation, maybe that means you get home, you see your family, and then you have a video call at 7:30 once you put your kids to bed.
Right.
It's actually easier for the RM than having to go out and do something, right? You can just have a quick phone call early in the morning. So I think the attitude still needs to be the same. It's just going to look a little bit different. And I actually think it's better because it's more efficient, Right,
more work-life balance than traditional before. Well, cool. Well, we always ask at the end of the show, what are 2 things as a community bank CEO that's keeping you up at night? And that's outside of kids, spouses, all those fun things that keep us all up at night. So what are 2 things that are keeping you up at night, Steve?
Well, I think, for us, some of the stuff you touched on, we are, we have a really good franchise. We're one of the better performing community banks in the country. So that it doesn't really allow us to do the M&A scene. No one can afford to buy us. We're too good for most people to buy because they ruin our franchise. And that means that every day we have to earn our independence. And that's really about finding the talent that's going to help us organically grow and outpace the market. So that's always our mantra. And I think that, there's, with the remote banking now, there's a lot more, there might be a, kind of perception of a lot more compliance issues and risk. I don't think so. I think it's the same thing. But making sure that you have the right, processes and procedures in place to kind of confidently do that, put your guardrails in place, and then you got to make sure that you can drive that car as faster than the competition, so to speak. Now, what gives us confidence, that keeps me up a little bit at night, what doesn't keep me up at night is that very few of my peers think the way we think. They're worried about, they're over concerned about a lot of things, and they're terrified of technology. So I think as long as you're a community bank, and not just the CEO, but anyone at the bank, if you can be a little bit different, a little bit more progressive, I think there's a lot of runway for you to be successful. So,
yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Well, awesome. To learn more about Steve or Tim and what they're up to in their banks, click on the links in the show notes. As always, if you have any questions today for either Tim or Steve, feel free to submit those to us. We'll get you the answers. And this concludes the Executive Innovation Show today. Feel free to subscribe and get all your content weekly in your inbox. Steve, thanks so much for being on the show. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Carrie. Have a great day.
Thanks.
This podcast has come to a close. To hear more from the Executive Innovation Show podcast, subscribe, submit questions, and share the love. Follow us on social. We're everywhere.